Okay, so if it jumped straight from World War II to this, that means we got flagged by AI or whatever, and I cut out a big chunk of the middle. Uh, what was the if you are getting this, then we're going to talk about SSRIs here, but I want you to take what I'm saying about this and apply it to something else. What was the report name?
The 22nd statewide grand jury of the state of Florida.
Okay, and I will link that document below because I also have it saved here. If you're, like I said, if you're getting this right after World War II, then that chunk is missing, and that's the document that would be parallel to this. But I'm going to talk about SSRIs. So SSRIs are selective serotonin uptake inhibitors. All right. They are antidepressants. And the subject of before is pharmaceuticals and how they can be problematic, but everybody just keeps going along with it. And this is kind of a controversial topic. Again, thank you, RFK, for bringing this up because he made it even more controversial by linking them to other things. But I'm going to stick specifically with the brain chemistry and how they work and why they're problematic just in and of itself because of that. Uh, but this article here, let me make sure I have the article. Yeah. This article here was one I had to read for class, and it makes you go, hmm. Okay, so the name of the article is the chemical imbalance in urban legend, an exploration into the status of the serotonin theory of depression in the scientific literature.
Hmm.
Okay, so the serotonin theory of depression has been very popular. What did they say? Definitely since the 1960s and 70s, but it really picked up steam in the 80s. Uh, it's the imbalance theory of serotonin in depression. So basically, what that means is for the layperson, serotonin is a neurotransmitter. So if you've got, let me make myself big here again. If you've got one nerve coming in, and this is the end point, so you've got the nucleus, it shoots the signal down. This is the terminal, which would be the end point, and you've got the next nerve here. That little gap there is a synapse, and chemicals go from one side to the other to open up doors on the other side, which let ions go through, and it polarizes the next one, which sends a signal down. So it's a mixture of chemical and electric signal. So the chemical goes across, opens up the gate to start the electric signal, so that can just keep passing from one to the next to the next to the next. And depending on which ones are going which way to which parts of the brain, determine what they do. Serotonin is one of those chemicals. So it opens up the door for that polarity. And it's kind of known as one of the feel good chemicals, right? So if you don't, obviously here, if you don't have enough serotonin binding to those sites to shoot those synapses open, you're going to feel what we call depressed. And that could be a temporary state where something traumatic in your life happened and you're very sad. Or it could be something that in this theory you have a problem with it to begin with, so you're just prone to being sad all the time. And I'm very, 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 very much simplifying this.
Mhm.
Now the theory that you're just lacking it is the controversy here. Oh, share screen instead of just switching is the controversy here. Because well, first of all, it's a hard thing to study. Second of all, it's there's interest involved. What this paper did was looked at the wealth of knowledge. This is kind of a meta analysis on the situation, and what they found was that most about half the papers supported the serotonin theory, that there's a lack of it, but about half of the papers were uh, environmentally based. So it's that leads me to believe that are we chasing a chicken or egg situation here, right? Was it the environment that causes the serotonin levels to be reduced, or were the serotonin levels reduced from birth? and then the environment followed, which kind of exacerbated the situation. So I'm not as much convinced about is the serotonin theory correct or not with this talk. I'm more focused on what we did about it. Okay, what we did about it was they said, oh, SSRIs. If we block the reuptake inhibitor, if we block the reuptake, and I'm going to show you a visual here in a second, but it's a visual on something else, so I don't want to ruin the punchline here. But if you block the reuptake, so when that chemical goes across to the next one and opens the gate, after it's done opening, it releases and then goes back to the original side to be repurposed. And so what the reuptake inhibitor does is it blocks that repurposing, that reuptake to repurpose. And if the first one keeps releasing and you're blocking the other ones from coming back in there, you get an excess of that in that synapse. So you kind of get that euphoric experience because there's so much serotonin in that synapse that it keeps firing the ion channel that gets the other neuron going. And so that's how it works. There's a big problem with that. That sounds good. That sounds good on the surface. Oh, you just keep producing and it's not going back, so you just get an excess. Well, somebody who's got a deficiency will end up normal, right? They'll end up normal after that. The big problem with that is when it doesn't reuptake and recycle, your body stops producing more and more and more, and the receptors on the other side are so overwhelmed that they stop being sensitive to the serotonin itself. So that's a situation where you need a little bit more of the drug, and then you need a little bit more of the drug, and then you need a little bit more of the drug because you just keep getting desensitized to that situation. And I'm going to go ahead and bring up the visual I have here, and you're going to see a word in there because another drug works exactly the same way, only on dopamine. This is the top one would be your presynaptic membrane terminal, which is the one where the signal's coming from, and the bottom one is the one where it's going to. Okay, so those little purple dots in the top one, that would be your dopamine. And then they go to the wall and they're released into that little environment down there. Can you see my cursor moving?
Yeah.
Okay, so that little environment down there, and then they attach to these little receptors on the other end, and that's what opens up the ion channel. That's why they use the little electrical charge there. So that's what opens that up. And then they're released and they go back up, and here's a normal one right here that I'm circling. That would go back in there and then go back into the terminal and then be recycled to be used again. This little drug right here blocks that channel. The little Pac-Man is the thing that eats that dopamine back up and would put it back in. This drug here, the red, is what blocks it and causes it to be over represented in that synapse for a while. There's the name of that drug.
Huh.
So basically, I'm reading this, seeing exactly how SSRIs work, and knowing the after what and seeing that they work exactly like cocaine does on dopamine, only on serotonin, SSRIs on serotonin. I'm like, wouldn't the after effects of that be similar to what you see from cocaine?
Mm-hmm.
That overproduction causing the desensitization of those receiving proteins on the bottom, dopamine receptors, serotonin receptors. That was, to me, the equivalent of SSRIs for depression is prescribing cocaine for chronic fatigue. You wouldn't do that, but it works exactly the same. Yeah, they'd sniff their lines and they'd have a burst of energy and go Wolf of Wall Street on you, and then they would crash. And then they would take their medicine, have a burst of energy, and then crash. And then those bouts of medicine, needing the medicine, would shorten in between. The dosage would have to increase in between. And what happens with cocaine is eventually you get to a point where you have no motivation, dopamine being the motivation chemical, you have no motivation at all unless you're on cocaine. That's the point you get to, and then you die because it also kills you.
Mhm.
SSRIs, you have no joy unless you have an SSRI at some point. You cannot create your own ever again. That's my problem with that as a drug. Now, on the flip side, to connect it to what we just talked about a little bit more, is especially in the 80s and 90s, to quote the article here, they have come to think of them, people talking about the people who, okay, so let me read the full sentence. As people have started to recode their moods and their ills in terms of their brain chemicals, they have come to think of themselves as neurochemical selves, with profound implications for their sense of agency and self-efficacy. And later in the article, he talks about doctors. They needed, I guess I should direct quote that one too, because we're going to pull them both together. They needed a need for neat and compelling biological explanation of depression. So you have two forces at work here. You have the patient who wants to have that, and you want a doctor who wants a simple, neat little package to put it in. And this got the ball rolling to where we have a massive industry. Pharma, everyone wants to say big pharma. All big pharma did was sell their drug. The responsibility here was on the patient and the doctor, really,
Yeah.
because I know in the new stages, they actually didn't understand what I just showed you as well. They just knew serotonin existed and it was responsible for the depression. And people who were depressed had lower levels of it. And this might be a way to boost it up. But once we knew the mechanism of it, this this is my problem with doctors. They are so uninformed about the drugs they prescribe. It is unreal. And patients want to have that. They want to, because it's not my fault. I've got this serotonin deficiency. I just need to take this drug. And not only does that take away their agency from, it clouds the water on what exactly is the problem. It doesn't give them any incentive to actually work on the actual problem. Because now, oh, I've got this thing that takes care of the problem that you told me it was, is a biological imbalance. No, what caused the biological imbalance? Well, when we pull the literature together, as this paper does, there's a lot of environmental issues that go along with it. There might be some genetics, but there's a lot of environmental issues. Maybe we need to be addressing those environmental issues that are causing your in work on dopamine itself, your gut bacteria is massively involved. They don't know how, but they figured out that your gut bacteria is massively involved in your dopamine levels. Okay, well, what about your serotonin levels? Maybe it's something that maybe diet and exercise. We could start that. And I'm not completely pooping on SSRIs, although because of the mechanism, I would love to find another way. But you take a pain pill when you've got a wound, but you still work on the wound.
Mm.
And maybe we need to, if you've reached a point of major depression and you're thinking that you're going to kill yourself or something, maybe you need a little pharmaceutical intervention in the beginning, but you need to be working on what got you there in the first place. And if you call it just a chemical imbalance, you eliminate all the other stuff. So back to other things we talked about, comorbidities. Age you can do nothing about, but obesity you can do a lot about.
Oh yeah.
Type 2 diabetes you can do a lot about. All of these other things that were downstream of that you could do a lot about. So we
Were,
need to.
were we recording, or was it when we were fishing that you were talking about this, that you wish that they had come up with a different term for type 2 diabetes than type 2
Oh,
diabetes?
I don't know if I've said it on here. Yeah, I do wish they would have. I wish they would have named it a separate illness.
Yeah, because it is.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's actually works completely differently. Type 1 diabetes, for those that don't know, your pancreas does not produce insulin, which is very bad because insulin is what helps get the macronutrients into the cells themselves for the cell to use, mostly carbohydrates and energy, glycogen. Uh, type 2 diabetes is the cells resistance to its insulin. They are no longer receptive to that signal. So yes, they both involve insulin, but they're completely different problems.
And I think it's a great illustration of what you're talking about that is easy to wrap your head around because I think we all understand the obesity problem in um so it's kind of funny if you I watch a lot of British stuff because I like most some of it I don't get but I like most British comedy that their particular weirdness like appeals to me. It works for me in my brain. And it's funny if you watch, like Top Gear or any long running British show and America for a very long time was the punchline because we were all fat. Somewhere around 2010, they started making themselves the punchline.
Mm-hmm.
So the comfort crisis, the first world problem of obesity has spread throughout the pretty much the entire industrialized world. I remember a story on I've referenced the channel before, China Uncensored. A couple years ago, there was this story out of China that they were having problems meeting their army recruitment quotas because obesity had become such a problem in China. Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, another downstream effect, and I
But
can speak.
hold on.
Go
Let me finish my thought. The reason it connects here is because of what you were talking about and how this is a bigger issue is that the the medical response was to look at what happens with obesity and what that does to what that does to the way your body produces and uses insulin and say, oh, well, this is mechanically like diabetes. So let's just treat it like that. Wait a minute. Why not undo the problem in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Why not undo the problem for those that have it and prevent the problem for those that don't have it yet but are on their way?
Well, we're seeing that push right now with semaglutide, Ozempic, and Wegovy, and all of those drugs. Oh, you've got type 2 diabetes and you're 200 pounds overweight. Here's a pill. It'll make you sick. Your stomach might go numb, which is a weird side effect. But all of these downstream effects. But you're going to lose some weight, and your insulin resistance is going to go down for a while until you get used to the drug, and then we got to up the dose, and then we got to up the dose again. And oh, we don't know what happens when you actually get off of it. We don't know if you've become dependent on it or not. So we'll just keep you on it. Here's your pill. And when it comes to the other topic in this, it's on us.
Mhm.
We needed to speak up earlier and stronger about other things. And we need to be educated on what exactly these medications do to us. Because not only could you be making the problem worse, you're developing a comfort level that doesn't facilitate motivation to address the problem. And then downstream of that, I can't speak for serotonin, but the breakdown of dopamine in the synaptic fluid and the extracellular fluid causes oxidative stress. And so that's one of the ways cocaine eventually kills you is oxidative stress on the cells themselves will cause them to die or to break down and die.
And to the point that that article was making, for decades, this was the science. You couldn't now, in defense of people who were trying to question the established narrative, one of their problems were people like Joe Rogan who just want to do shrooms and ayahuasca.
Mhm.
And it's like, you're not a good spokesman, man. You need to scale it back, bro.
That's not a good example because he brought good spokespeople on.
Yes, now that is true. Although they sometimes get sidetracked and spend way too long on the other stuff. Um, but that was kind of the point they were trying to make is well hold on. This thing that we think we're so certain about, we're not actually that certain about. In fact, I knew what you were going to talk about, but I didn't know how you were going to talk about it. And so now I need to get up and get something. So let's pause for 20 seconds here. All right, so a little hiccup there because I had to jump up because this ties surprisingly right into a couple days ago. I had an appointment with my psychiatrist, and initially I was a little annoyed because not just him, but that whole office, that whole practice. If you go in and because other people who use that practice that I know, and if you tell them these meds aren't working or aren't working as well as they used to, I was going in there wanting them to just up my dosages. And instead he said, well, why don't we try these newer medications? And I was initially annoyed, but in your talking, that actually makes me hopeful that he's more open-minded and open to some of these newer practices and ideas. And specifically, while I was in there, I asked him about something because one of the medications he's going to put me on, he said it was a derivative of a psychedelic. And I asked him, well, I hadn't heard of this specific thing that he was talking about, but I have heard of um, and read some of the research on ketamine.
Hmm.
And so I got a little pamphlet here, and it is, I'm going to cover up the brand name just so we don't get in trouble, but it is if you struggle with treatment resistant depression. So in other words, this thing that we thought we knew and that the science, the medical community, big pharma have been telling you for decades, this is what it is, and this is what is wrong with you, and this is how you fix it. Well, actually, no, we're not that sure. And I'm trying to find where it was, but there was a little blurb in here that blew my mind because in this pamphlet it's talking about um the common oral treatments that uh increase neurotransmitters of serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, and these things. And um one of the things it says in here is that it is believed that these things work this way. It's not known exactly how these work. And I was like, wait, what? This stuff has been the standard of treatment for decades, and you're not exactly sure how it works? That's not something that's in the standard marketing. And it blew my mind of, wait, wait. So why have you been doing this for so long for so many people? And and that is one of the things I thought of immediately when you brought up that study and just looking at the abstract there. And that's what I thought of wait a minute, chemical imbalance. Yeah. If that's not actually what's going on, or maybe, we don't know. So it's possible that's not what's going on with all people. It may be that the chemical imbalance is the right answer for most people or some people. But the fact that psychedelics, specifically a lot of this work, I first heard this from Jordan Peterson, him talking about it, because I didn't know. I've mentioned before, I found out from my dad that ketamine was a party drug 20 years ago because it was the first time he ever had to do a serious disciplinary action against someone in his whole Army career, is because one of the vet techs had gotten into the ketamine.
Hmm.
And had been stealing it for use and for sale. And he had no idea. He's like, we give this to cats to make them loopy so we can do surgery on them. It's like, he had no idea this was a party drug. And then I found out
That's how
later.
science works.
Yeah,
The guy realized, hey, the cats get loopy. What do I feel?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then I found out later that at the outpatient place I go to, that they use it, the anesthesiologist uses it in some cases. And and then I heard Jordan Peterson talking about it as a treatment for depression, and experiments and studies that were being done on it specifically, but psychedelics in general. And I didn't make the connection because I don't know the witchcraft of, well, wait, that would mean the standard practice, the long held narrative isn't true or isn't wholly true, isn't completely accurate. And yet You were a Joe Rogan pothead if you challenged the narrative. If you said, well, wait a minute, there are these other things. I mean, to your point about, that's how science works, and look at what happens to the cat, is it at some point someone figured out that you could put willow bark in a tea and it would make you feel better.
Hold on. Uh, Let me see if I can work this backwards. Interesting. Okay, so we do have some mechanism here. All right, let's bring our synapses back into our terminals and synapse. Get out of the way, screen share thing. Move. Okay. Okay, so you should see the ketamine at the top here. You see that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that's that. I guess the chemical derivative there of it. That tooth thing, it's stabbing into this GABA interneuron. Uh, GABA is an inhibitory uh, neurotransmitter. So an inhibitory, so if you're dealing with depression, an inhibitory neurotransmitter could be shutting down signals, down regulating signals that normally would have been something that should be excitatory. So if you've got this, so here's a great example in reverse. What you inhibit with alcohol is your GABA receptors, and in the same way as we talked about with cocaine and with the SSRIs, once you if you cut alcohol cold turkey, you've put yourself in a state where you're not producing enough GABA to inhibit excitatory neurons. And so that's why you get the shakes. That's why you have high anxiety. That's why you can't breathe. That's why your heart rate dysregulates, because this inhibitory neurotransmitter has been depleted and basically taught your body not to make enough of it for a while. And you have to go through the process of your body re-regulating to get back to it. This is the opposite of that. So it's inhibiting the inhibitory response because you're down and out. So it's helping you be up and motivated. And I just did a quick look over there. I'm looking at whatever. Okay, so let me bring this back. This if you go to where I'm circling here, glutamate synapse. Glutamate is basically the opposite of gamma or GABA, excuse me. So if
Every time you say GABA, I think Garbo and I think Greta Garbo, and then I get distracted. So that needs a new name.
no, but so it's basically what's probably happening, what I guess they're theorizing is happening in major depression is there's overactivity of these GABA interneurons, which is causing an inhibitory uh, charge to the neurons. So you have excitatory and you have inhibitory. They're all interacting on the neurons at the same time. But depending on which one basically polarizes the right way, it sends the signal down. And so what it does is it blocks the inhibitory one. So the excitatory ones, which would release the glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, and now things are firing at a little bit higher rate, at a little bit higher frequency, which if it's something connected to the mood centers of your brain, that would be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was just a mechanistic thing. What I don't know is what the long-term effects of that would be. It doesn't look like it's the same as just blocking the GABA receptors, the reuptake receptors, because like alcohol does, uh, because it's inhibiting the whole neuron, which is just basically like hitting an off switch. So I don't know what the effect of that is going to be long term, and that's probably why it says we do not know the. So we'll have to see going down, but it's a different approach at least.
It
And
also seems to me that, so this is something that has been said, but I don't know how strongly it's practiced, that, the drugs that the pharmaceutical reps are selling for mental illness are supposed to be or should be used in concert with psychological therapy.
yeah, they're supposed to be.
And I don't know how often that's actually done.
Well,
Um,
and here's let's go back to SSRIs and my example of using cocaine for chronic fatigue. This is why I use the pain pill analogy for a wound. This is why I think it's a little bit different because if you develop a dependence on something, you could you could be undoing any positive you do with the therapy. Because yes, the therapy addresses the things in your life that cause the synapses to fire the way they are with the proper chemicals. But if you're creating an environment where you're not producing the proper chemicals at a greater and greater and greater and greater increment, then it doesn't matter what you're creating because you're basically shooting the foot of the person trying to do the walk. It's that's what it seems like to me. Like a pain pill for a broken leg. That does nothing to stop the bone knitting back together and the muscles getting back to where they were and the skin healing and everything. But to me, the fact that you need the proper channels of serotonin release, binding, and then reuptake for you to feel a certain way, and the therapy just creates an environment where your body is encouraged to do that. Well, blocking that might get in the way of the therapy.
yeah,
And
that yeah,
I can't speak to the ketamine because I don't know
yeah.
what it actually blocks. If it just if it's not dependency forming, then it probably would be a better
Mhm.
solution to the problem.
Well, I might be able to give you anecdotal personal accounts. We'll see. Um, we're going to try some new medications first because it's new and because it is a psychedelic. In order to take the ketamine derivative drug for something like the first 2 or 3 weeks, you have to go into your doctor's office and then stay there for like an hour to make sure you don't have a negative effect. Um, that's really annoying.
That's the other
So,
complicated part of it is there
yeah.
might be something about your brain physiology that would cause okay, so again, we'll bring alcohol. It's the easiest one because most people who are listening to this, if they've listened to this long, you're probably drunk if you did listen this long, but it's they are familiar with alcohol and how it affects them.
Mm,
And you know, if you've been in a group of people that go drinking, if you have 10 different people, you probably have 9 different reactions to the
yeah.
alcohol. You get
Yeah, that's a good point.
you get the person that gets sleepy. You get the angry drunk. You get the horny drunk. You get the person like me who all of a sudden becomes a salesman when he's like passed out drunk. Uh, you get all kinds of different. Like I get hyper. I get manic when
Hmm.
I'm drunk. Where some people fall asleep, right? So it's you get all kinds of different reactions because the brain is so freaking complex.
Yeah.
And you can't just say, oh, it does this one thing and it's only going to do this thing. There's only 20 different neurotransmitters and only 16 we've really mapped.
Yeah.
20 is the theory. And so if you think there's only 20 different neurotransmitters, but how many different behaviors can a human have? Almost infinitesimal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you've got 20 different chemicals doing an almost infinitesimal, uncountable trillions at least of different behaviors, how are you going to say, well, I'm going to do this one thing for this one behavior and it's going to not affect anything else at all? You can't.
No, that's a good point, and that's what makes mental health science. As we've talked about this before, what are you trying to do with any scientific study? Is you are trying to narrow down and control as many variables as possible and just tweak one thing. Well, but when it comes to the brain, that is incredibly difficult because there's so much going on and there's so much of it we just don't understand. Um, I've referenced this before, and I'm trying to find the specific example. Um, dang it, which episode was it? So I've referenced the Y files before. And there was an episode a while back where they talked about the idea of uploading your consciousness, digitizing your consciousness. And we,
Oh,
uh,
this is right there with the AI free
mhm,
will debate I had with my group.
exactly. But just one specific point about it. This is going to drive me crazy. I'm going to have to try and find it and bring it up later. But basically, they do the math. They show you the math and basically make the point that there are a bunch of people trying to do this, but it's literally not possible until we discover, well, I would say first, is quantum computing even possible? Is it real? And then can we do it? Because just the raw ones and zeros of your brain are so far beyond, like exponentially, scientific notation number beyond what the most powerful computer right now can do, that we literally do not have the computing power to store a human mind. That's how powerful the brain is, just on a ones and zeros level. Just when it comes to the synapses, those electrical firings, just how much computational power your brain has is astronomical. I use that word specifically. So, socking it all around, the point being, again, besides the fact that this is an interesting subject, the bigger picture here is, how many decades have we been told this is the way it is? And I don't think I've made this point before, but one of the reasons I love the Y files is because the host who does it, besides the fact that I love their writing and I think they've got a good comedic timing to create some levity in some sometimes very serious topics, is he is a uh, a self-professed skeptic. Except when he uses that word, he doesn't use it the way the you know Instagram atheist plus YouTube nitwits use it when they say skeptic with a capital S. And what those people mean is, not only I don't, but I won't accept anything that does not affirm my preconceived worldview. And if you go back and you watch the Sunday school episodes that we did a million years ago, what the reason I hope that we can be interesting and influential to people thinking about these topics is because you, the atheist, and me, the Christian, we both admitted, because if you're being intellectually consistent, you have to admit, I can't say with absolute certainty I'm right. I can't say with absolute certainty you're wrong. There's no way you can do that. Is the guy, the AJ, uh, the Y files guy says, is that it doesn't work for me, but that doesn't mean you're stupid or wrong for believing it. There are so many things that we are told this is the way it is with absolute certainty, and you're a moron if you disagree, that there's literally no way you can say that. Not and be honest.
That's why I like Sapolsky's argument, because he talks about these are all the factors that go into why I don't believe in free will.
Mhm.
We start what is the chemical process 1 second before, da 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 da, back to your genes or your fetal life, your genes, the evolution of your culture, where you grew up, your evolution as a human. He goes all the way back, and he says, but that doesn't answer everything. And so he sticks with his answer of, I think free will, as we describe it, is just the parts of the brain we can't measure yet. And that leaves open the fact that maybe we can never measure them. And if we never do, then there's always an argument for free will.
Maybe this thing that we can't measure, we will eventually figures out negates my hypothesis. I'm open to that because I'm intellectually honest. That's why I like Sapolsky.
Yeah, well, it even leaves open the fact that, well, okay, so maybe it does exist, but you have less of it than you think you do.
Mm.
And the more we end up being able to measure, the less and less and less and less of it you do. But I actually want to change the argument, because I think the term free will is problematic in this. because the word free is very precious to a lot of people.
Mm.
And I listened to Sapolsky and Daniel Dennett arguing over, debating over free will. And Dennett's a what do they call him? Determinist. So he's an atheist as well, but he believes there is some innate agency within us all still to begin with. So it was kind of a distinction without a difference argument, but it in a lot of ways I was like maybe as they kept going with this with agency and punishment and crime and all the different topics, I'm like maybe we should change the word to individual will,
Hmm.
because free will, you're being controlled. And yeah, maybe my dopamine system is responsible for almost every action I take, which is the not free will argument, which is it's true. It really is. Everything that you're motivated to do is a dopamine response. So yeah, so maybe, but that's still me. That's still the
That is
one
still
in
unique compared
that
to you.
yeah, one in e to the something trillion figure the exponential number that is me.
Mhm.
And it's a consequence of my genetics. It's a consequence of my environment. It's a consequence of every decision I've made up into this point, whether it was mine or not. But it is still me. It is still an individual. And when we talk crime, punishment, agency, everything, well, we're talking about the individual. And so it's individual will. That was my individual will. Was it right? No. Okay, I stabbed somebody in the neck and they died and I went to jail. The me that comes out of jail is a product of that time in jail, plus my genetics, plus my environment, plus all the way. But the environment changed. So if we look at it this way, well, then we can start looking at all of these controversial topics like that. Well, it could be parenting also, because your child will be a product of your parenting to some degree. We can start saying, okay, well, what's the best environment to make the change that will make this person a more positive, uh, positive spot in our universe, realistically.
We haven't referenced this in a while, but that's why that conversation between Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin was so important when they were talking
The
about
parenting one.
the parenting conversation, is because if you're not being intellectually curious and intellectually honest, you can't have that conversation. And the Dave Rubin of maybe 10 years ago wouldn't have been able to have that conversation because he would have been offended. But because his mind has been expanded, because his worldview has been expanded, he's able to sit down and talk with someone who says, because you are partnered with another man, you are going to have these deficiencies, and not feel attacked, but take that as, okay, that's it. That is a truism. So now what do I do about it? How do I adjust? And it's not just that, again, that is a particular instance, but the bigger point is it's not just for that issue. It is, okay, if that is true in whole or part, then what do I do about it? How do I adjust to that? How do I have it? And that's why I think that that's quite the epiphany, because you're right. The free will argument is problematic, because if you say I have no free will, I'm instinctively going to say screw you, because what you're saying if you say I have no free will is I am controlled. You are a
Mm.
robot.
And that's why I
You
use
are
the word
not a person.
individual will, because
Yes.
then you can include terms like collective will and authoritative will. Collective will would be like that hive mind where you get caught in the moment in the crowd. You know, you're at a concert and you can't help but scream at the top of your lungs because everybody else is screaming and you're screaming and you're excited. That's kind of a collective will. You wouldn't have gotten that way just listening to the same song on your iPad or whatever.
Mhm.
So you can start. I think we use the word individual, collective, authoritarian, which is someone making you do something. Which when we start talking things like Neuralink, we might have some issues, or just being manipulated. So now you could say, okay, free will is everything that I was able to do on my own. I don't care what the factors before it were.
Mm.
If it was it a dysfunctional? action? Was it a dysfunctional behavior? Okay, so maybe there's things in my past that I need to go back and look at, or maybe there's things in my genes that would contribute to a deficiency, like the the mutation in people who tend to be addicts that have more receptors for a mutated version of the dopamine receptor. Okay, so maybe we can look at that, but I'm still me. So I am me, and I have to make the changes along that path to do the thing. I think it becomes a more productive conversation at that point.
Hold on, just I got wife aggro. Don't let her know I say that because she is a gaming nerd, so she knows what aggro means, and she gets mad if I say that because she yells at me that I'm not a big monster. That's all right.
Well, we need to
Um,
pull this one to a close anyways. We're
yeah.
closing on
So
2 hours,
let
so
me
or
let me bring up the last thing
three
I
hours.
had
We're
here,
closing on 3 hours.
and this leads perfectly into the last thing. I forgot I had this. I forgot I had this tab up. Um, But what made me think of this is where I thought we were going to be talking about today, which is the immigration laws and or lack thereof. And specifically, something that came up that infuriated me was Kristen Sinema, who is technically an independent, and Senator Langford of Oklahoma. It is quite, you can make the argument that Oklahoma is the reddest state in the nation because for
Or
the
the belt of
last,
the Bible Belt,
and,
or the buckle of
and
the Bible Belt. Yeah.
politically speaking, for the last several cycles, the Democrats have not won a single county in presidential elections. Uh, there are a few Democrats from the urban areas in the House of Representatives, but on the county level, they can't win a single county. And James Langford, a former pastor, senator from Oklahoma, joins with the supposedly most moderate person caucusing with the Democrats because she's technically an independent. And the immigration issue is a huge issue in Arizona. And they issued forth one of the worst immigration bills that has ever been proposed for numerous reasons that I won't go into now because we're trying to wrap this up. But
We'll just say all it does is uh, give money overseas is one. Two, it solves the too many people coming over as illegals by just making them legal.
mhm,
And three, it gives the president more power.
it codifies the lawlessness by passing the buck to regulators, basically, passing the buck to bureaucrats. Now, when I was listening to Steve Deace talk about this, he said something that sounds extreme and inflammatory, but isn't wrong. And I bring it up because of what I said earlier, which is that right now, changing things is going to be difficult and uncomfortable. The longer we wait, the more likely changing things is going to be dangerous and even deadly. He used the term treasonous. He said just the proposal of this bill was treason. And I don't disagree. You don't have to go back that far. And anyone who proposed, let alone even vote, let alone voted for this bill, just proposing this bill, it's treason because what we're suffering from is an invasion at our southern border. Why do I bring that up? Because you talked about individual will, individual action. So because of that, that got me to wondering, is it possible to recall a federal official, a federal elected representative or senator? So this is from Ballotopedia. And I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, but I'm just going to stick to this page and scroll it down. And this is handy because it gives you uh, a quick explainer of can you and then how do you recall a state official, elected or officer. And there's a bunch of different ways depending on local. Here's the nut though. And this to me is very interesting. The United States Constitution does not provide for recall of any elected federal official. The option was considered during the drafting of the document in 1787, but was not included in the final version. Some state constitutions have stated that the right of citizens to recall their members of the United States Congress, but whether it is constitutionally legal at the federal level has not yet been ruled upon by the United States Supreme Court. One of the closest noted legal precedents is the U.S. Term Limits Inc. versus Thornton, in which the Supreme Court decided that the states did not have the right to impose new terms, qualifications, or conditions on federal service. I think it's long past time we challenged that. I think someone like Langford and Sinema, by even proposing this bill, let alone forget even voting for it. No, I think just by proposing this bill, they are in clear violation of their oath of office, which is to protect and defend the United States and its and uphold the Constitution. I think there needs to be a move in those states in particular, but for other federal officials who do this crap too, to recall them. How did Roe v. Wade get overturned? Whether you like the overturning of it or not, that's not the issue. The reason it got overturned is because while they pretend to be above it all and be all about the law and not the politics, the Supreme Court is a political institution. And what ultimately overturned Roe v. Wade is that while they ruled on a specific case of Mississippi versus, I think it was Mississippi versus Planned Parenthood, there were something like 7 or 8 other states that had already passed similar legislation, or and even more that were considering passing similar legislation. The main reason it finally got overturned is because there was enough political pressure on the Supreme Court to say, this never should have been a federal issue, and you need to make it stop being a federal issue. If there is enough pressure because there are enough movements in enough states to recall or impose additional requirements on federal elected officials, the Supreme Court will buckle, especially John Roberts, because John Roberts isn't a judge. He's a politician in a black robe. I know I've harped a lot about doing things on the local level, but to me, this is a local issue because this is putting power back in the hands of municipalities and the states. That case, U.S. Term Limits Inc. versus Thornton, that is a blatant violation of the 9th and 10th Amendment, which says if it's not specifically elucidated in the Constitution and it doesn't violate the specifically protected rights in the Constitution, the states have the power and authority.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a senator, and I'm going to rant at my family about this because most of them still live in Oklahoma, is there needs to be a movement to recall Langford because this is unacceptable. This is a blatant violation of your oath.
Is he being primaried this cycle?
No, that is the sleazy political reason why this happened, because he comes from arguably the reddest state in the nation and he just got reelected. So he's safe. That is why sleazebag Mitch McConnell had Langford be the Republican co-signatory to this bill, but then reportedly behind closed doors is telling people not to support this because the backlash has been so bad.
No, he gave a speech on not to support it, I thought.
Yeah. I don't remember which is which, but it was.
But the backlash was so massive. I mean, especially over the funding for overseas interests being more than half of
the funding going to just to Ukraine is something like double what the entire Marine Corps budget was last year.
And keep in mind, it'd be like what, the 4th check we write them,
something like that. Again, with right after we learned about massive corruption, because every time we have written them a check, there has been absolutely no oversight written into the legislation that appointed these funds. Absolutely no oversight. I don't know what you call that, but treasonous. And if you or we as a people are too squeamish to follow that through to its logical conclusion, the least we can do is yank these people out of their positions of power because they are not defending the United States and upholding its constitution. And that needs to start happening at a local level of we are going to hold you accountable.
Oh, there's so many examples of this. Rashida Tlaib.
Yep.
Okay, so
So
I do
yeah.
not back DeSantis's statements to strip her and deport her, but she's allowed her free speech. But what she did say in that statement was that she's not representing the people that she's supposed to be
She
representing.
openly declared, I am violating my oath of office.
Exactly. So she should be stripped of her position, not deported. She's still got freedom of speech. She shouldn't be deported if she's a legal citizen. You know, all the shenanigans there are, we'll leave those for another day. But officially, she's a U.S. citizen. She can say what she wants, but that doesn't mean you can keep your job. And that in itself, if you declare allegiance to another country, you have just, unless everybody in your district is an immigrant from that country, you've just declared that you do not represent the people that you are. She's in the House of Representatives.
Even if they're all, so this is something I meant to, if we were going to talk about this, I was going to pull up.
We'll just make it a new topic, but,
Yeah.
but let's be quick about it because
But for anyone interested, go pull up the oath of citizenship that you take when you become a citizen. She is also in violation of that, as would any of her constituents who are cheering her for that. If they have gone through the citizenship process, they are in violation of that oath.
Let's see. It says, I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentiate, state, or sovereignty, of whom or which I have heretofore been a subject or citizen, that I will support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America.
Yep.
So when she used the word my king, was it king or prince? I can't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Well, either we're going to do something about it or we're going to get the government we deserve. So there it is.
All right. We'll close it out there. You know what? This one's so long, I might make it into 3 parts.
Yeah.
And I'll put part 1 and 3 up first. That way, if part 2 gets flagged, at least the first 2 are up already before.
Yeah.
It does. And if you're a Wheel of Time person and you only see 1 and 3, that's why we're not here Friday.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think we played the edge of it pretty well, but there was one word that popped up a lot that starts with a B, and I think that's the first word that gets you flagged. And then the S and E word that went along with it a lot. Those words are so close together. That's every time you said that, that's why I started cringing, because those 2 words are the ones that really get you flagged. So,
well, we'll see if we're here Friday, which may be on Thursday, actually, since I'm headed down there for Super Bowl weekend. So
yeah,
hopefully we'll get a Wheel of Time episode up.
I got to get a chapter done, pharmacopsychology. So yeah, psychopharmacology. That's what it is.
You should just watch Altered States while you trip balls on some psychedelics. That'll be
fun. And I got to read 3 papers. What do we got this week? Polysubstance use and the U.S. opioid crisis. That should be fun.
Just watch that Netflix show I was telling you about.
Botox headaches and caffeine and Adderall. Oh, those are going to be fun.
Lovely.
All
right. Well, you have fun with that. And then hopefully we'll see y'all tomorrow or Friday with some Wheel of Time funness.
All right. Later, guys.